All right, Wayne, we are here, and it's going to be a more jolly pod than normal because we're going to talk about United's victory over Villa at Old Trafford. It looked pretty dark at half-time, and we'll talk about the details of the Ineos 25% investment in the club, which was detailed in the SEC filings, which came out on Boxing Day. Anyway, how are you? Did you have a good Christmas?
I had a good one. I will tell you one thing. I was sat at half time, Old Trafford yesterday, and I was thinking to myself, this is quite miserable. Some wag is going to who listens to this podcast is going to pull up a stat about how rare it is that I've been on this podcast after a win this season, because I was trying to think and I couldn't think of one, and I was thinking because it's probably a number more miserable than the Scott McTominay passing stats that you pull up, and I was like no. So delighted that we won a game, delighted that we won it in the way that we won it, and delighted that I avoid that catastrophic complete clean sweep of defeats. If it is, at least there's now a victory in there.
I can't remember either.
It was all good.
Your record is worse than Eric Ten Hag's away at the top six.
It's terrible. And I do like to think I'm a glass half full person. And I noticed on the comments on the last pod on YouTube, it said, Wayne, bless him, trying to be optimistic. I was like, yep. And I couldn't think, how is there an optimistic route out of this one? And there just wasn't. That's route for the American audience, route for the English audience there. I'm giving you a couple bilingual.
There you go. I'm bilingual as well. Well, not really.
All good Christmas actually, thank you. And obviously these things, moods of middle-aged white men are close to middle-aged, not quite middle-aged. Nearing middle-aged white men are so governed by our football team that
it's sad, isn't it?
We good spirits. Yeah.
What counts as middle-aged?
Mid-40s, is it?
Oh,
I don't know.
Oh God, I feel like because we're living longer, that has to be pushed out. I'm just making the argument here. I think the definition of middle age should be at least 50, and we're all going to live till 90 plus. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'll keep pushing it up as long as I'm alive.
Whether we'll see another title victory in our lifetimes is another question. I'm sure we will. Yeah. I'm sure we will. Now we're going to talk about it a bit later, but now that the Glazers are basically out of control, I will predict on this podcast here that the Glazers will never have full control of United ever again. And so that's something to celebrate, and I think a good reason to believe that the next title is closer than it was yesterday.
Nice.
I know there's a weird amount of negativity around this on the internet, which we'll get into, because I think a lot of it's misconception. A lot of it's driven by some fan groups who I think I wish they'd reach out to me. I would give them off the record briefing on how this works, but or any of the other people, Andy Green at Must, any of the other people who really kind of understand finance, would give some people some assurances about what's happening here. So. Anyway, shall we get into the Villa game first? Because I have to say, at half time, there was. So I went to the supporters branch. There was me and a friend and 3 other blokes and the bar staff. Normally, there's like 100 people. It's really busy, but it's Christmas, middle of the day. Boxing Day is a working day in the US, so there's no one there. And believe me, you would not have found a collection of 5 more miserable blokes on the planet than at half time yesterday. We were like, shall we just quit? Shall we just drink very heavily? What's the best course here? Anyway, I suspect it was probably similar at Old Trafford because the boos were quite loud, weren't they?
They were, but I will say this. Newcastle in the League Cup, Bournemouth at home in the league. People were getting up and walking out in those games, obviously, quite early on in the second half. Quite a lot of people were getting up, but they weren't yesterday. Right. And there was, there was such a loud booing. And sporadically through the first half as well, because it was the latter part of the first half. It was a really intense booing. In fact, I think it was just before we kicked off after the second goal. There was a very loud boo, like that went around the ground, and but it was like more of a frustration rather than a hopelessness yesterday. And there was like, maybe it was Christmas, the fact that people were a few drinks in where they might not normally be on Boxing Day. There was more of a sort of, that frustration of, come on, let's get back into it. So when we scored early on in the second half and it was rubbed out, and then we scored again pretty soon after that, there was a real change in the atmosphere. And you do, like I said earlier about pinning your mood on football matches, you do try and work, and I'll probably try and do it on this podcast, even though I feel like it's past that point. You try and put everything in the idea of, oh, this is a turning point, something different. Now, in a larger perspective and looking across the season in a broader way, is there anything to take from it? I don't know. There are some things, I guess, but sometimes it's just about the individual moment and coming back to win 3-2 in a football match when it started pretty miserable and we haven't seen a lot of high points this season. And I say that as someone who, by the way, home games this season, we have been treated to a comeback from 2-0 down, and we have been treated to a 2-goal in the last minute against was it Brentford? Brentford in the last minute, and then to do that against a very good Villa team who, admittedly they were quite open, surprisingly open at 2-0. What can you do? You got to enjoy the moment. And
absolutely, and the Boxing Day crowd, the Boxing Day crowd at Old Trafford is always slightly different anyway, because it is kind of like family day out for a lot of people, I think, and that does change the atmosphere at OT a little bit, I think. But yeah, look, we started the day, given that Luton scored a couple of times, with the second worst goals scored record in the Premier League, not just amongst the top 5 or 6 in the whole league. And not many of them been scored at Old Trafford. It's pretty dire. And I'm not saying it's your fault, but it's a non-zero correlation between these two things. You coming on this pod and United not scoring. So it's good that,
just for this season, by the way, last season it was a 100% trophy haul. So let's put swings and roundabouts.
I mean, you can understand United's frustration. I mean, starting the day in like 7th or whatever it was, hardly any goals scored, 13 games lost before Christmas. The uncertainty around the takeover, the massive injury crisis, increasingly question marks about Ten Hag and what he's doing and the kinds of decisions he's making and his response to it all. And then
and sorry, just to interject before you carry on, and to add to that, to compound matters, the general feeling that Aston Villa came into this game probably as favourites.
Yeah. Been in great form. Emery has built a side there that's not. It feels atypical for him. Actually, playing a high line, attacking football, not the low blocks or the defensive side we saw at Villarreal. And anyway, so all those things kind of combine, and 25 minutes in, and United are 2-0 down, and you can kind of understand why there's a lot of frustration. Funny thing is, when the teams were announced and the McTominay experiment had ended, and Kobe Mainoo was there in central midfield, and Eriksen was there, and I was like, oh. This looks a bit less like Ten Hag chasing balance for the sake of dogmatic balance and more like playing your strongest side. Garnacho down the right, Rashford down the left. I mean, he'd changed it around. I guess he had to in a way, but we said that a lot of times this season. He has to change things, and he kind of hasn't. And I was beginning to think the kind of dogmatic approach was, it's not quite Louis van Gaal levels, but it was kind of reaching that, and I was begin to feel like that's his weakness. It's all about the system, and I just like, and I mean, I was like, oh, this looks different, and I was actually feeling quite positive when I saw the team an hour before kickoff.
Yeah, and then you see him line up, and particularly in the first half, and I think more down to the fact that we went a couple of goals down and we started chasing. We still reverted to this line that we do of 5 players trying to push their defence. Like everyone pushes up. So Ericsson was in that front line. He wasn't sitting deep alongside Manu, which on first glance, when you look at that team sheet and you see Ericsson there, you say, all right, we're going to control some of the tempo in that midfield, which we desperately need to do. And we desperately needed to do that against Aston Villa, and a very good Aston Villa team that we talked about the strengths of last time out, and talking about the need for pragmatism. So he identified that with the selection. First of all, you think, all right, that's a positive step. But then when we went 2-0 down, he was like reverting to type with everyone in unfamiliar areas, like Ericsson in areas where he wouldn't affect the game anyway. Do you know, like he was sometimes playing as the last man, or trying to press that, or stretch the line at least. And it's so unfamiliar with the way that we do that sometimes. And it probably needed that half-time sort of reset, sort of, know where you're meant to be on the pitch, and don't try and push the game don't lose the game 3-0, trying to get 1 goal back, trying to win it in 5 minutes, which there seemed to be a general anxiety in the players to do that. And then once we did calm down and Ericsson did move back, it did give Bruno that space to, we've talked about him on the last podcast. And I was saying before the game is that I was worried a little bit about Bruno because he's become a little bit lost within that system, that when we are chasing games, that's not his ideal environment for us. He's not the ideal environment for any player, but he's a risk taker, and he
comes extra chaotic, doesn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But yesterday, with Ericsson, in the second half, I hasten to add, with Ericsson dropping a little bit further back, giving Bruno that freedom in that area, he was brilliant for about 25 minutes. He was unbelievable.
5 through balls yesterday. That's a league high. I think that's exactly right. I felt by Ten Hag not being so dogmatic in his approach with this game, there's a dichotomy, right? So he's a pragmatist, yet he has some things that he's very dogmatic about. He's very dogmatic about wanting to have a left footer on the left side of central defence for passing lanes and build up. He's been very dogmatic about how United build up from the back. And it is kind of amusing when United try to do it with the pass from the defender to the goalkeeper and then don't quite make it and launch it long anyway, And I know what they're trying to do. And yet he's been kind of pragmatic, playing McTominay in there as someone he thinks can grab him goals when they're not scoring goals yet. It destroying United's ability to play out through the back as a result. So there's this weird tension with some of the decision making, and I felt like he just got, while not seeking the exact balance he wants yesterday, he actually came up with a more balanced side. And it wasn't even like United played terribly in that first half. They defended badly for the 2 goals. I mean, they're both absolutely horrendous, aren't they? No one challenging for that first goal, and Onana just getting frozen. I'm not entirely blaming him, because that kind of ball does score goals, but no one attacked the ball, did they?
There was a lot of focus on the offside player. I forget who who was standing offside, and everyone was looking at it, sort of like flag him, and there was obviously.
I think it's just very clever. It's just very clever.
No,
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah, Villa got a set-piece coach, and who was celebrating vociferously alongside Emery. He's the kind of shaggy-haired bloke. Yeah. I forget his name, and obviously that's a plan because he didn't get in the eye line of Onana. It's not deemed interfering, or impacting the ability of the player to play the ball. I forget how it's exactly phrased. I think interfering is not the words used, but anyway. So yeah, he's standing around Onana and then he runs the other way. It's just, it's very clever. And then the second one, I kind of felt Varane could do better there. I mean, for someone who made so many clearances in the game against Liverpool, Varane, that was an uncharacteristic error, because actually what you expect of him, his strengths are like box defending. So it kind of felt like it wasn't brilliant from United in the first half. It was quite slow, and they weren't able to penetrate Villa. But it wasn't horrendous apart from those two pieces of defending. But then we did get something very different in the second half, didn't we?
Yeah, we did. And I should say as well, because I agree with that. And by the way, a good finish for the second goal. He was completely unmarked to be able to do that Dendoncker, but it was a great finish nonetheless.
Yeah.
But the thing I always look at with the United team, and we saw signs of vulnerability when we scored goals yesterday, because we conceded chances straight after scoring the first and second goals. They had big chances to score again. But the thing you look at with this United team consistently, I'm talking like through the last 24 months, so whenever we're in cultural reset mode or whatever, you look at reactions without needing the manager to do it. And too often, this United team have been lacking. And maybe that's personnel, maybe it's systematic, because we've seen it from time to time that we do see reactions. We saw it under Ole that team, sometimes they would react by themselves, sometimes they needed off time, but they were quite a good reactive side. And then under Ten Hag so far, generally they've not been a very good reactive side. But yesterday, when we went 2-0 down, Rashford had a couple of good openings, and the reaction was pretty good, apart from when we got a free kick, and it was soon after. So it was definitely in the first half, and Bruno went and stood in front of Martinez to do the same trick. Basically, he was basically all he was doing was trying to more get in the eye line of the referee to show what he was doing, and he's like, "This is so pathetic." Like, I love Bruno, and I'll champion him, or like in his unbelievable contributions to turning the game around yesterday. But there are some things that are just so pathetic like that, because you are not helping the cause. You're not helping anything. No. You're not going to get that goal back at the other end. So he stood in front of Martinez, and I think Eriksen hit the wall in the end, and he just went out, and you've done nothing there. All you've done is aggravate people who are on your side, really, because the crowd get frustrated with the histrionics. And I do remember him saying in an interview that all that sort of stuff is just him. And you take, like what we used to say about Rooney, when it was the big conversation. They used to say about Keane, and they said it about Rooney and about Cantona. That the Rooney one was funnily after the Northern Ireland one, where he clapped the referee who sent off Beckham a few years earlier. And he was like, well, you can't take that out of Rooney, because if you take that out of him, you take away half of the player who he is. But I don't see that with Bruno. You can, I'm sure, get an amateur psychologist just to sit with him and just say, look, watch a game back and just say, look, these are the things that you do that don't help anything, because you can't change a decision. And if you don't do that, it doesn't change your ability to, you could sort of see with Rooney, he needed to be wound up sometimes. Yeah, I understand that. Cantona liked to play on the edge. That's what gave him defining moments in a way. But Bruno, what are you doing? Like, we need, especially when you're the captain, lead by example. And he did in the second half. I just found it hilarious that he was doing things that, well, when I'm trying to find humorous subplots in the first half, that was one. I thought, all right, I can have a little laugh at this while everyone else is getting frustrated. But generally, and Bruno was part of a good reaction in the first half, by the way, not just in the second. He did lead some of the good reaction in the first, because we were getting back into it, into the game, into the flow of the game before the break. That gives me a little more optimism, because if you've got a group of players who can do that, who are motivated to do that, then first of all, it throws out the window the idea that they're not playing for the manager. Second of all, you've just got general greater belief in their propensity to do this kind of thing, instead of needing a rocket up them, like needing to wait 45 minutes to change it. No, there's something there. There is something there to be built upon. And yeah, it's been lacking too often. But yeah, when, like you were saying earlier, sometimes this is the process where we're seeing some of it is systematic and some of it is with the players. And the closer that we get to a system that works, the greater the capability of these players to do something, which we all knew last season.
Yeah.
But it's all about the manager at that point. At this point in time, it's at this very point in time where we're getting a greater number of players back, and the balance between what we're losing and what we've lost from the squad and what is there in the squad is on the more positive side. Then the manager needs to be pulling out performances more than results. And yesterday we got a performance.
Kind of need both. Yeah, it was interesting. Like even at halftime with the United 2-0 down, the amount of times that they'd managed to break through Villa's defensive line, partly because Villa were playing so high, and partly because we had a bit more balance in midfield. We weren't consistently outmanned in there. Was kind of interesting. I think I might have tweeted at half time, it's amazing how many times United have broken through, and there were opportunities, weren't there, in that first half too. So it didn't feel like it was completely doomed, other than Villa hadn't lost any points from a leading position this season, and don't concede that many goals. So, apart from those two important things, and United don't score any, apart from those three important things, it felt like there was some hope. And I mean, of course, we saw straight away after half time, the goal, Garnacho's goal was correctly ruled out for offside. He just went a bit early, or Rashford played the ball a bit early, one of the two of them, and he was half a yard offside. But like that, we'd seen that move already, hadn't we, in the first half? And so it wasn't a huge surprise. And then they pulled it off again. So it was, there was hope there. On the Bruno stuff, I don't know. I mean, I'm kind of amused by how childish he is. He really is very childish and petulant. I don't know if it takes away or adds anything to his game. I think the thing that matters most of all for Bruno is how the system is built around him. And when we have McTominay in the side, and I don't want to sound like a broken record here complaining about him, he gets in his zone all the time. And you end up with Bruno deeper, your most creative player, further away from goal than he should be, and a much less creative player much closer to goal. It's bonkers. And there were times that did happen yesterday. And of course, Eriksen can play there. He's a much more creative player in that kind of free role. But if you have the structure that there's protection behind and Bruno's in the half spaces, it's so dangerous. He's still like, his numbers are still great, elite. For expected assists, chances created, shot creating actions, goal creating actions, all of it, right? Key passes, 5 of them yesterday. And you just want him there. And the childish stuff, I mean, it is so stupid, isn't it? And like, it's I guess the most tangible thing is he managed to get booked yesterday for arguing with the referee. I think that's now 6. He gets another 2, he'll get another suspension.
Yeah.
It's just like, don't want him missing crucial games.
Exactly. When you're saying, is it a good or a bad thing? That's the bad thing. The bad side of it is
that's the bad thing. Yeah.
Yeah. You do get that.
Yeah. And referees have been directed to offer more yellow cards for that kind of thing. I mean, am I right in saying he got booked for Martinez's challenge on Rashford for arguing the ref? Martinez, not even a foul for that one, by the way. That's any player other than a goalkeeper. I know this is a cliched thing to say, but any player other than the goalkeeper, that's a clear yellow card every single time. It doesn't matter that you got the ball. When you clean out the man with both feet because you're not in control of what you're doing, and he clearly wasn't in control there, that's always a foul. Goalkeepers are allowed to do that.
Yeah, that's... And he's dangerous as well. He was like the Nunez one, Johnny Evans at Anfield.
Right.
It's just clearly dangerous. What you are doing something like you're thinking about blocking off the opponent and hurting the opponent in a way, and that was reckless enough in my eyes. And all right, I'm a United fan, and I have no particular love for Martinez. There's another thing about him. I dislike him anyway, and I know he's one of those players that if he was in your team, you'd love him, that kind of thing. Like our own Martinez is the same. But so there was a game a couple of years ago when Bruno missed the penalty against them in the last minute at Old Trafford, and he was celebrating in front of the Stretford end. And he's one of the worst for time wasting. Now he wasn't that bad yesterday, but the challenge riled a lot of people up, and so for a player who enjoys incurring the wrath of rival fans. It was quite nice to win. And then suddenly the speed in his play became quite urgent, which is always humorous. There are some obvious things we're going to be talking about, I guess, as we progress with the pod. I do want to mention one non-obvious thing, which was absolutely beautiful. Mainu's pass to Garnacho just before the second goal. There's a lot of chaos going on in the midfield, and he just picked this peach of a ball out. They just rolled it. It was only maybe a 10-yard ball, but it opened up the play completely because Garnacho then spreads it and he eventually gets the return to score. And there were some great passes, mostly by Bruno and a couple by Rashford as well, because I think it's fair to mention those good ones from Rashford. Maybe a 6 out of 10 game overall for Rashford, but some crucial involvements.
It felt like there was just a little spark of something from Rashford yesterday. Obviously in his more comfortable position, which might be instructive, I hope, for Ten Hag. I mean, like, if you want to get him back into form, play him in the position he most wants to play, if we're going to do that. And then Garnacho being on the right didn't appear to impact him. Obviously, he got the 2 goals. He can still get into dangerous positions. I don't know that he really wants to go on the outside all the time. I think he does want to play in both half spaces and come inside, which does make narrow. It is a risk. Yeah. He's just much more of a goal threat than Antony. And when we're short of goals, that's kind of important, And also, he gets much closer to Højlund than Antony does as well. And so it'd be interesting to see how Ten Hag sees that, whether he sees that as a one-off, or he actually thinks, okay, these are the players that are more dangerous. In a side that's not scoring enough goals, to have the kind of balance in midfield with a 2 in the pivot, at least closer to a 2 in the pivot, whatever balance of that 2 is. We might Menu in there who finds the right passes almost all of the time. Just, the maturity in his game. It's kind of interesting, isn't he? Because he's sort of been playing as a deeper player, but really he doesn't play like that. He plays more like a Tony Kroos or Pedri or something like that. Finds the angles in his passes. All the time. Love him. Don't want to hype him up too much, but he could be the greatest. No, it's like he's just already a very, very good player at Premier League level. And I don't know. I wonder whether Ten Hag will think, okay, maybe just playing the players in the right positions or they're in form or just finding the balance that way rather than saying I dogmatically have to have the players I want in these positions. So we'll see whether that's instructive.
The Garnacho thing was a good call, like you said. Obviously, it was going to be interesting to see how he impacted the game, and it was a massive impact. Dangerous throw, not just with the goals. Obviously, the disallowed goal, but he generally looked like a threat. And obviously, like I said, it provides the opportunity for Rashford to play himself back into form. Now, when you've got fluid front players like that, I'm not comparing them in terms of ability, but you remember Rooney and Ronaldo, it took a long time. And by a long time, we're talking 3 years, 2 to 3 years of those two players playing together and still trying to find the right kind of connection where they could create damage on the pitch. And, you mentioned there, would that be a one-off or are we going to see more of that? While you were saying that, I was thinking, is there a one-off comparison I could think of? Because I was going to bring up the Rooney and Ronaldo point. And because Rooney and Ronaldo, in terms of the bigger picture thing, Ronaldo was playing from both sides. And I'm talking primarily about the spring of 2007 when Ronaldo really blossomed and he became this world star. So Ronaldo was moving around from either side at that point. He wasn't just staying on the right or staying on the left because he scored the winner against Fulham from the left. And Giggs played in that game, so he scored the first goal. So there was definitely some movement around. I don't have the game to hand or to quick memory, so I can't categorically say who played where. I just know where the goals were scored from. And then later on in that season, only a few weeks later, we played Roma, and that was the outlier. It was a 7-1, and you don't really get a performance like that. But Ronaldo played from the right, and that was basically Ronaldo's position then, was like a false striker from the right for the next year. Now, we didn't play that system. We didn't play the 4-2-3-1 for the next 18 months, but Ronaldo operated in that system for the next 18 months. And we changed the system around. So we didn't see the Romas every week, but we saw better football, particularly through the autumn when Tevez signed. All of that to say that really it's Garnacho's position that seems like it's the key one, because obviously the key issue for United has been the right-hand side and productivity on that right-hand side. And you've been more complimentary towards Anthony than I have in terms of what he brings to the team. His defensive work and the work that Ten Hag sees, and I definitely agree with that. But obviously, for any front player, of the front three players, you want productivity and goals and assists.
Yeah.
And if Garnacho does that, like he did yesterday, then that is a massive step forward for this team. Because obviously we've got talent from the left, and Rashford can play in that area and he can cause unbelievable damage. And if you've got a player like Garnacho who is already scoring and assisting, you almost saw it yesterday. And I don't want to be premature because it is only one game, and it is like a Roma 7-1, which might not be repeated in the next weeks and games. But you almost saw, even from Højlund scoring and Rashford just playing a little bit better, the liberating effect that one player doing what he's supposed to be doing in one area can do to the other players. And that's a definite reason for excitement.
Oh, for sure, yeah. And I mean, it's what I was saying earlier, really. It may not be the perfect balance of where each of the players wants to play with Garnacho on the right, but it's good, definitely more goal threat. I mean, Anthony has proven over a year and a half now with the club that there's almost nothing there. He doesn't attack space. He wants the ball to feet all the time. He does carry it well, and he does do his defensive work well, but it's not enough. It's not enough for an £86 million forward, although we know that United paid 3 times, thanks to Adam Crafton's reporting, 3 times as much as they had planned to on Anthony. Absolutely fucking bonkers. Of which more to come in this pod discussion of, that is. But like getting, for a low goal scoring team, getting players both closer to Højlund, but into threatening areas, just really important. I mean, the other thing, Højlund scored yesterday, and you saw what it meant to him. Late goal, nice finish as well, instinctive, and he was trying really hard yesterday to get into the right positions. There's been a lot of struggle, I think, with United to try and find him. He doesn't get many passes. I don't think that's just about him, because his movement's actually pretty good. His expected goals this season across all competitions is 6.7. He's now got 6 goals. So it's a lot of narrative around his lack of goal scoring in the Premier League. Actually, the biggest problem is it's number of shots he takes and the chance creation for him. That's the biggest problem. I think if they find a way of getting players closer to him, so he's get more chances, especially getting Bruno higher up the pitch, I think he'll get goals. And then maybe that balance is right. Rashford, Garnacho, Højlund, Anthony for when we need that kind of player in the side, but not a guaranteed every week, please and thank you, which is something remarkable for an £86 million player to be thinking. Obviously, Sancho's never going to play for the club again, unless Ten Hag gets sacked first, which I wouldn't, bank on if I was Sancho. And they'll find an exit for Martial now. We have new people in charge of that part of the football club. So, it's United aren't going to score tons and tons of goals this season, but there's some reason to be hopeful. That may be specific yesterday to Villa, and Villa taking a lot of risks. Emery definitely wasn't happy. Happy, was he? Happy on the sidelines there, with exactly how they defended that lead. And I think it didn't feel very Emery-like, did it, to give United so many opportunities? But we can take that forward. We have to. I mean, I know we've said this before this season. Every time there's some kind of positive result, we feel like we go back a few steps. But we have to take that forward. And now with Casemiro, he's probably another 2 weeks away, but Martinez is really close. He's been training for 2 weeks now. You know, we're like, you can imagine, we're very close. Luke Shaw had a minor problem, so we got very close to having a preferred back line. I don't know how far Harry is away, but we got Martinez, Varane, Dalot or Wan-Bissaka, Shaw at the back. Probably Mainu, Casemiro and Bruno as your midfield three. Maybe. Maybe, or like, we'll see. But that's a nice balance to it, isn't it? And some balance to the forwards we've been talking about. And it's just much closer to being the kind of side that both Ten Hag wants. We saw flashes of last season and will be just much more competitive in the second half of the season. Touch wood.
Yeah,
I'm touching my head for the podcast listeners, but it's like touch wood. That's the positive story. Because we could get smashed by Forest in a couple of days' time and feel very negative again. Who knows?
No, but I mean, that is that you've got to invest in the hope in some way, and that's the way, isn't it? Really, I do think it's a sensible way to look at it, especially considering there's been so much negative, plenty to pick from, really, and in terms of where we're going wrong. So look at something and see there's a semblance of a plan. I don't know. There's still not enough there that convinces me with the manager in terms of, because I will say this, to counter all the positivity that's been on this. Don't worry, listeners, more positivity's coming. Ed's got that in buckets for you. I don't, and I'm going to rain on the parade a little bit. At half time yesterday, I was worried. I'm generally always, behind the manager, and I still was behind the manager, but I did start to have my doubts whether or not he had the capability to turn it around, because I was looking at that team and I was thinking they're likelier, in my mind, they were likelier to go down 3-0 than to pull it back. That's what it felt like at half time, especially when we didn't make a change at half time. And then when we scored the goals and immediately conceded chances, you have that suspicion about their vulnerability of confidence. But, like you said, player by player, brick by brick, the team is getting towards where it needs to be. And each of those players that you mentioned, including Casemiro, who has had a rough time of it this season, but imagine Casemiro alongside Mainu, we could give him a new lease of life. Have Bruno just in his area where he's supposed to be doing the things that he's supposed to be doing. Have the pace and the penetration around him. Because really, what you've seen from the front three players, Rashford should have grown out of it, but he hasn't. And that's fine, because, and what I'm talking about is being profligate in front of goal. Now, you are going to get that from Højlund and Garnacho. They're going to break through and they're going to miss chances. Rashford, I mean, I'm talking about wastage, but he scored 30 goals last season. So if you get 30 and wastage on top of that, then that's still not a bad thing. I can remember Rooney scoring 30 goals a season and missing sitters. And you don't mind so long as they're scoring the 30. So as long as we're doing that, but what, like you were saying earlier. Anyway, before we move on, that we're saying brick by brick, we're getting there, and there is reason to be positive.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Yeah, hopefully. Okay. When he picks Amrabat and McTominay and Martial for the game against Forest, I may lose my shit, but yeah, we'll see. All right, that's the Villa game. We're going to move on to some of the takeover stuff, and then get to some New Year's resolutions or something like that, I think. All right. So we talked a bit about the takeover on the last pod. It was a little odd because I was on there. It's a system called EDGAR, which is what the Securities and Exchange Commission, it's the regulatory body that covers stock markets and company takeovers and stuff like that. In the US, because United are listed on New York Stock Exchange. I was waiting. They have a system called EDGAR. I was waiting, refreshing the page on United's page, like why hasn't the details of the transaction dropped? Because we got the press release and the IR statement on Christmas Eve. We talked about it last time. So anyway, it finally did drop yesterday, and of course, we're all pouring through that, and I took a few notes, and a few people have done, I think, Swedish Rumble and Muppeteers, and a few other people have done sort of longer threads breaking down what exactly is in this statement. But I thought we could talk a little bit about what the implications were, because there's some really interesting stuff in there, apart from the kind of nerdy M&A stuff, and it's just language, honestly. It's like, I'm used to dealing with it, but, it feels complex, and you can kind of understand with the amount of provisions in this deal why it's taken so long to negotiate. They've been negotiating this since May, apparently. But perhaps I go through the kind of key points, and then we can discuss what it might mean. So firstly, as we said last time, it's a 25% equity stake. It's equally split between A and B class shares. A are public, B are the special 10x voting right shares that the Glazers own. All 6 of the Glazer children that are shareholders in United are diluting down equally. They don't have equal percentage ownership, but they have diluted this sale down equally. Trawlers Limited, which is the vehicle that Ratcliffe and Ineos are using, will now own 25% of the club when this closes, and it will close when the Premier League gives approval, which should not take 2 years like it did with Newcastle. It's not very controversial, this one. So there's that. The 300 million that we mentioned last time, dollars of extra investment, is a convertible investment. 200 million straight away, 100 million by the end of 2024. It converts to equity, so Ratcliffe will own just over 29% of the club at that stage. By the end of 24, it could happen at any point in 24. It doesn't have to be on December the 31st or anything like that. Ineos have what is called consent rights in there, but basically that means there will be no dividends paid over the next 3 years. 3 years is a kind of crucial timeline for all of this to unfold. But Ineos have to consent to dividends being paid. Ratcliffe has said previously he doesn't believe that football clubs should pay dividends. He sees himself as a custodian, a steward of a social institution, not there to make profit out of. It's 180 degrees around in terms of like how you view a football club. The Glazers obviously see it as a way to make themselves money personally, and like whether like Ratcliffe holds none of my personal values. Like, his company is a mass polluter. He's a Brexiteer and a Tory, and he lives as a non-dom in Monaco. But I think he's going to be a much better owner of Manchester United than the Glazers, simply because he sees himself as a custodian. I think that's just so crucial. He's now the largest single shareholder, or Ineos are, Trawlers Limited are, I should say, in United by quite some distance, although the Glazer family combined have more shares and more voting power than United. There's consent rights for the next year after the close of this deal over any future shareholder. So basically, he has first right of refusal on anything sold for the next year, but then it's fixed in for the next 3 after that, like fixed price. He has first offer rights over any B share sales. So I'm just looking at my notes here. The Glazers can't back out of this now, and if they do, it's going to cost the club, if not them, Manchester United PLC, $66 million. 2 different blocks, one that covers costs and one that covers it's basically a fee, penalty fee. If the Glazers want to sell the club in full, or their interests in full, in any point in the next 3 years, Ineos have first right of refusal to match. And if they don't match, this is the drag-along rights I was tweeting about, they have to sell. And why that's important, I think it's not because somehow Ratcliffe can force the Glazers into a sale. He can't do that. But it's basically signalling that the Glazers the clock is ticking. From this moment onwards, they're ticking, and at some point between the next 18 months and 3 years out from here, they will sell in full. I'm pretty confident about that. Could be proven wrong, but I don't think so. I think this is them signalling that they are going to sell. Why they didn't just sell it all, I don't know. Well, maybe you'll find in the fullness of time. The really key bit, so that's all the technical financial stuff, right? So by the end of next year, Ineos will own 29% of the club. The Glazers between them will own just a touch over 50% with more voting rights. But they've basically relinquished control over the important stuff to us as fans. And so the sporting control provisions, which is kind of really interesting how it's structured, because you wouldn't, I had a lot of skepticism about this. But it's into the sale agreement, right? It's written into the sale agreement exactly how this will work. So from this moment onwards, even though it hasn't closed, they have full say over any sporting decisions. And that is manager, coaches, sporting director, transfers, contracts, structure of the men's team, the women's team, and all academies, right? So every sporting decision is now controlled by Ineos, not the Glazers. They have relinquished control of the thing that is important to us. Now, there's a question mark about how the budget is decided. Ineos will now have 2 seats on the board, and obviously they can be outvoted as a block. They'll also have 2 seats on the club board, which is effectively a subcommittee of the parent company on sporting matters and control over sporting matters, and it's written down in real detail. Right, so that cannot change. There has to be a plan. If there are already plans, they can be executed with consent. Brailsford and Jean Blanc are already in there, looking at the details of this. So that is the thing we wanted, right? No longer is Joel Glazer in charge of saying yes or no on any sporting matters, on the training facilities, on transfers in and out, on new contracts, on whether the women's team buy a player or whether there's transfer to the men's team. None of that is in his control anymore. And so I'm trying to think, what else haven't I covered here? So the initial purchase, the 300 million extra, is going to convert. Drag-along rights, I think, has the clock ticking. There's a bunch of first preference rights I talked about. Liquidation preferences. So if it gets sold, Ratcliffe has first right to buy into the club. I think this basically says within 3 years, it'll be 100% owned by Ineos or close, pretty much close to it. They'll take the club private, and they see themselves as custodians. I think that is all really, really good. It's not the Glazers fucking off permanently right now, but it's as close as we were ever going to get with what they were going to accept. So, there you go. Hopefully I've summarised that well.
That was brilliantly done, that Ed. There are two there are 2 obvious points, not to anything that you said, but kind of like not side issues, but sort of like short term and longer term issues. The one is obviously the debt that's leveraged on the club, but that will be a formality with the longer term part of the Ineos takeover anyway. With that being a supposed, or like, let's see, an apparent formality in that 3-year period, and then the other part is
there's nothing in there about debt at all. It's not going to get paid off until full change of ownership. And it may not even then. I mean, Ineos run themselves with a lot of debt. It's when you're a company making a lot of money, you can run it. It can be quite cheap and quite cost effective.
Yeah. But what I mean is, like, in terms of its operational impact on United over the last 2 or 3 years, it's quite significant operational impacts. Whereas moving forward, that wouldn't be the case because of Ineos
I would expect so, yeah. I'd expect so. There's nothing in this sale agreement that says that, but I'd expect so, yeah.
And the other thing is the club's Ten Hag's capability to operate in the transfer market within the next 18 months, and with the transfer debt and everything like that, which I guess that'll become more clear as time comes on in terms of the equity that Ratcliffe and Ineos are putting in, how much that can be fronted. I know you've talked in the past, and I don't understand it 100%, but in terms of like the £100 million loss that they can afford to operate at, well, obviously there's the debts on the transfers of Casemiro and Anthony and other players that are outstanding, which
it's not going to impact that at all. Yeah, but the funny thing is, it says in the filing can be used for operational expenses, right? So although this was kind of trailed as the $300 million, £250 million or so being for infrastructure, that may be what they're earmarking it for. It's not actually what it says in the filing. It may well be. I would be very surprised if they spend it on transfers. Basically, just because United's FFP position, like United's cash position, is an issue, but the FFP or profit and sustainability position is tougher, right? So under Premier League rules, they can put 105 million in. In fact, they can, depending on how it's done, they can put even more than that in, obviously. 105 million, 90 million, if it's converted to equity, will count against FFP over a 3-year rolling period. So that's just to say they could go towards profit and sustain. The equity investment could go towards profit and sustainability of the club. Once, I don't think they'll do that. I think they'll still run on as close to the FFP ceiling as they possibly can, which is what they've been doing. I would not expect some massive transfer this January as a result. But they will look at, they might do things that the Glazers were not prepared to do. And this is just pure speculation. But they may take a slightly different view of how they see contracts running down, like it not being an asset, but actually being a sporting cost, which is very, very true, right? So having players that the manager doesn't want on the books just because you take an impairment charge on selling that player at a loss or subsidizing their wages or like letting them go for free so they can maintain their wage position or something like that. Like that would not happen under the Glazers, but it might happen under Ineos because they're taking a different view of what sporting needs are versus financial needs. So we'll see. That's speculation. But yeah. Anyway, my view is this is all very, very good and it's the best we could have got. What it doesn't do is it doesn't guarantee that the Glazers will go at all. I think the fact that they've got timelines in there for guaranteed value means that they probably will, almost certainly. They're guaranteeing this $33 a share price, which is hundreds of millions more than we think was offered by the Qataris. Why? I don't know. Because I was 100% convinced that was a state bid. That's just how it kind of works. The state and the private economy are intertwined in Qatar. I don't know why they didn't go higher. Political reasons or whatever. I don't know. They just didn't. And so this was the best deal. It's also become abundantly clear, given that this has been negotiated for months, that the last 6 months of people posting on Twitter that the imminent sale to the Qataris, it's just weird. I mean, was stuff coming out of their PR team? It's if you read some of the messages from some of the reporters on Twitter who followed this closely, it seems like the Qataris PR team was briefing that a full sale is imminent for months after that was dead as a concept. And the Glazers are only willing to countenance a partial sale. It's so weird, and I don't know why. But anyway, the point I was making is this does not guarantee the Glazers are going. They could wait out their 3 years, wait out the time after they get the guaranteed price. Ratcliffe, after that, will still have first preference. There's no time limit on that. He'll still have first preference, and there won't be a guaranteed price. So, and if you look at the history of United's share price since 2012, it's never really been much higher than 22, 23. And that was just during the early part of the sales process, right? So that tells me they would give up hundreds of millions of pounds potentially in a sales price by just waiting it out. I don't think it's going to happen. There's just no guarantee. There's no guarantee that Ratcliffe and Ineos will become 100% owners of the club. I just think all the signs point to that being the case, and this is what is going to happen. What I don't know is why the Glazers wanted to structure it this way, because there's a time value of money. Money into their pockets right now is worth more than money in 3 years' time, because they can invest it in something else. They can do things with it like they enjoy, I don't know, funding Trump's 2024 presidential bid, because they like to do that kind of thing, or sending money to political parties abroad, which they also do with their particular causes that they support, or spending it on another house in Florida or whatever, or investing it somewhere else, right? Money is more valuable now than it would be in the future. So
the point
I don't know why they have to.
The point is, though, is that answers the question of why it's taken this long to do, is because the answers are complicated and we don't know.
It's really complicated, yeah. It's a complicated deal, and it's complicated between the family members.
Yeah.
So, and that's why it's taken so long, and why it's been so frustrating. And I think Ratcliffe has probably got to the best deal that he could possibly get to. I suspect with what the Glazers would allow, because they owned the shares, sadly, and they still do have control. They don't have anywhere near as much operational control as they had, but they have control over their own shares. So they have control over the destiny of who owns this club. I just suspect, given the way this is structured, that they are setting a future price, and that future will be within the next 3 years. Unless someone comes along and offers more, which they could do, but they weren't prepared to this time round. So, maybe they're betting on the global economy getting better and money becoming free again, and all these private equity firms will come in, but I doubt it. Not that price.
Well, what we should all do is follow Sky Cavey for more. I'm sure he'll.
Oh yeah, he's blocked me. He blocked me when I said on Twitter that journalism used to be a noble profession. I don't know why he took offence to that, but so I haven't seen what he's had to say about this deal. He seemed so certain that Sheikh Jassim's bid was going to be the winner. Odd.
Yeah, he's you alluded to it earlier, the misinformation that's been spread for 6 months by I think something like an institution like Manchester United Football Club. If you're not informed, and he wasn't, I think the level and the specificity of his misinformation pretty much tells us that he was misinformed. And you would think, because I always think like a diorama, like these things are good case studies for misinformation, for what not to believe. But that in 2 weeks he's going to be tweeting transfer nonsense. Maybe in 2 days he'll be transfer nonsense. He's already proven to not have the information, and you're still going to follow him and try and engage in that information. Tell us more, Cave. Tell us more. He'll be like, my understanding is that I understand this thing that I've just read on Twitter, and it may or may not be true, but I'm telling you that it's true.
It felt more than that, didn't it? Though with him, it felt like there was because the Qataris have engaged a few PR firms. They had quite a few UK-based PR firms for the World Cup, it feels like there's been some cash floating around. I can't name any names, but I was told by someone that certain media personalities were on retainer.
Well,
right? So. Yeah,
that could be true. It could be another avenue of misinformation. I won't speculate.
It could be.
That. But what I will say,
speculating, I don't know. Although I would very much appreciate the Sky Cavey testing out my First Amendment rights. So if he feels like it,
what I would say is it's incredibly irresponsible of someone in his position. I will say journalist. Which is still the profession itself is noble. The activists in the profession, maybe not. So many of them are. By the way, I would say all of them are. Why not? Why not? I'm in a very jovial Christmas spirit. Manchester United won 3-2 after being 2-0 down. Now, what I will say is, for a noble journalist, it's incredibly irresponsible to be using your platform, which you say something on a television news network which causes a little ticker to turn yellow, which provides imminent information about a global institution, which affects prices that go up and down, affects people's ability to spend money because they invest and withdraw at different rates. It's so irresponsible to do that. And now, all right, if people choose to believe this kind of stuff, then that's on them. I just think as an individual, and I've tweeted him. I may be blocked now, Red, but there's probably some kind of interim period where you were blocked and I wasn't, where I tried my best to appeal to his better nature as a human being, to sort of say, like, I don't think human beings should be doing this kind of thing, Cavity. But not in that way. I was kind of like, could you elaborate more on the source of this information? Not in the way that, you know, a journalist doesn't reveal his sources. I know a good journalist wouldn't do that, but give us a little bit more meat on the bone that is better than the regurgitated time, I don't know, Qatari Times thing that I've just read on the United Report Twitter account. If you can give me a little bit more meat on the bone than that, Cavi, then I will believe that you are honourable in what you are saying. But he never did offer that. He doesn't have to, because he's a big star reporting on international television. He doesn't have time for a small fry like me. But he should really have considered it a service to his profession and the people that he was serving with this information, because I think he looks a little bit silly now. And I just hope that in this incoming 4 to 6 weeks, not with every football club, Ed, but just with matters relating to Manchester United, if you follow Sky Cavi, perhaps take his reportings with a pinch of salt.
I actually should with all of it, yeah. I've noticed that Fabrizio is tweeting regularly about Ronaldo and how many goals he scored in Saudi Arabia at the moment, which is very, very odd. I'm like, what? Is this news? It's just like, maybe just gets a lot of engagement and the blue tick is paying him handsomely at the moment. I don't know. Some very odd things happening in that noble profession that is journalism. I'm not a journalist. I never had any inside information on any of this. Some people have worked that better than I have. What I do know is how these deals are done. And so hopefully I've managed to give some insight into like what this means and the structure over the last few months. And, I feel quite good about this. Like from being points over the last 18 years of Glazer ownership, where I was just like, if United loses, does this make it closer to the Glazers fucking off? Would this be better? Like having to feel like that, and I never really got to that point, but, many people did. They, and I'm a shareholder in FC United, by the way. I was like one of the earliest. My £200 investment, I don't think it's going to make me a millionaire, but it was just a sign to say, hey, this is good what they're doing. So, like many times I felt over the last 18 years that just pretty despondent and hating what football had become, but particularly hating what the Glazers had done to United. They have been the worst possible owners. They have been, it was not catastrophic to the existence of Manchester United that I felt at points when United were paying 14% interest on the debt. And it wasn't clear that there was a pathway out of that. They were saved, the Glazers. They did not have any special insight into like BT and Sky going at it for years. So those massive increases in domestic television rights, or the global market for the Premier League rising. That was not the Glazers did that, or the global market for sponsorship rising. That was not, and it was not United uniquely that managed to achieve that kind of global sponsorship rights either. In fact, other clubs have well outpaced us now. So they got lucky. So there were times I thought it might be existential. So it didn't happen. That didn't happen. But they have been as destructive as owners of Manchester United as it was possible to be. And they now no longer have control over the most important parts of the club. So that's a fucking great day. That's a great day. And whatever I personally think of Brexit Jim's policies, doesn't matter, because I think he's going to be a far superior owner of this club, as he puts it, custodian, than the Glazers have ever been. On day one, he's put more money into this club than the Glazers have over 18 years. Fact, right? On day one. So this is a very good day. There's a pathway to them being out, and a much better ownership group being in place. That's good. Not perfect, but that's good.
It's a positive step. It can only be a positive thing when capital's put into the club. I am personally grateful for you taking the time to sort of simplify it in a way that can provide more optimism. And really, you know, there's a thing about football where, and I've said this many times on this podcast, where so much of it is governed by results and performances that all the extra stuff is either compounds it when things are bad, or it can relieve it when things are better. Do you know what I mean? And so if you get good news, like obviously like capital injection and a clarity over where the club are actually moving and some kind of direction in terms of first of all communication from Ratcliffe to was it MUS, was it Must,
Yeah.
Immediately communicated with them. All of these are positive things, and so when you win a game of football, and I know it's now become the secondary issue because what you talk about is so important, but when you win a game of football at a time of year where we're at and everything like that, then these little things can be. We're talking brick by brick in the team earlier, weren't we? But brick by brick in terms of the club and moving forward, these little things can be massive incentivizers. Fergie was the best at this and explaining it. Confidence in football is probably the easiest thing to destroy and the hardest thing to build. It's like a lightning bolt. When it strikes, you want to catch hold of it for as long as you can. And you can't do that on the back of a 3-2 win over Aston Villa. Oh, by the way, I mean, if we're doing stats, how good was it? If you want a team to be 2-0 down against Manchester United's history, I don't know how many times, but there's going to be at least a couple of times. You'd be like, all right, it's Aston Villa. Lads, it's Spurs, lads, it's Villa. And I'm if there's any Villa fans listening to this, I don't mean that as dismissive. I'm saying this with full relief of the fact that we won a game of football against you. For the last podcast where I was praising you to high heavens, and yesterday outside Old Trafford, telling everyone that you were the favourites to win the game. And then praising John McGinn as a great midfielder, and then cursing the fact that I'd done that 30 minutes in. But the positivity that you get from all of the stuff that you've just been talking about and winning games of football, it's enough, Ed, surely, to keep me off the podcast for another 5 months, just in case. There's another. No, unfortunately, listeners and viewers, that's not going to happen. I've got Ed on Class A and Class B shares for the podcast. So.
Is that right? Yeah. Yeah. Before we go, should we talk about some New Year's resolutions? I mean, what does I guess like this is going to be the year of a year of change, I think, in terms of United. I mean, there's going to be a wholesale change in the football department. I'm pretty sure about that. We're going to get a new sporting director. Has Murtar officially gone? I mean, it was kind of widely reported that he was going.
Said, I mean,
not been official,
thing was.
And
the Richard Arnold thing, the fact that was communicated in a way makes me think that you'd be waiting for something to happen with Murtar.
So we'll wait for the official confirmation of that, but I think it's widely expected that he's going to leave. We'll get a new sporting team in there, a new managing director. I don't know exactly how they're going to structure that. Patrick Stewart is still the interim CEO, so we'll get a new CEO, some kind of general manager of the sporting department, new composition of the football club board. And so that gives us a kind of platform to think about 2024.
Yeah.
So what, and then like all the players coming back and I'm very confident that Ten Hag will, unless there's something horrendously catastrophic happens over the next few weeks, that Ten Hag will see out the season. Then we'll see. That'll be a time to evaluate. But so what are our New Year's resolutions for the club and the team? Do you reckon?
My one wish, what I want Ten Hag to do over this 6-month period, assuming, of course, and I want this to be the case, that he maintains his role as manager, because I think we've weathered an incredibly rough period. I mean, if you can survive losing 7-0 to Liverpool in any whether fair or otherwise. Yeah, all right, you're better off doing it after you've just won a trophy, because that's one of those untenable positions that we've talked about in previous podcasts.
Yeah.
Losing 3-0 at home to Bournemouth, losing 3-0 at home to Newcastle in the League Cup, and losing 1-0 to Bayern Munich at home, and losing a number of home games. All right, that run of fixtures and performances could have been untenable, and I don't think there would have been many people arguing, having a really compelling case. I mean, I've tried to argue it on this podcast in a positive way, but I've always generally come back to the argument that I've used for every single manager, is that we've never gone over this little bump. And now we are at the point where we're pretty much over that bump, in that we can see the light at the end of the tunnel in terms of players coming back. So what I want to see, what I think is an important resolution for Ten Hag for this period in the next 3-4 months, if we do have injuries, we can't go back now to players that we've tried and it hasn't worked out. So unfortunately, Anthony Martial, it's been frustrating for both of us. That Ballon d'Or clause is not going to get activated, unfortunately.
Sad.
You're going to have to go elsewhere. And so it doesn't serve...
What if he scores 40 goals in the second half of the season?
No, I'm not. I wouldn't even at that. So I've seen enough. And for Martial, it's time for him as well, because it doesn't serve him any purpose to hang around. Now, that's just one player. You mentioned others. We all know obvious players. Now, I had a caveat here, mostly for McTominay and Maguire, because they've come in and done all right. I know that you've got your frustration with McTominay. He might still have a role to play in the squad, just not the role that he's been playing. But there are other players where you would say, well, it's terminal in terms of their career at the club, like Van der Beek. There's no point going down that system, trying that kind of again. There's no point doing the short-term loans anymore, I don't think. I think now we're getting a little bit of capital in there, the ability to operate in the transfer market with a little bit more freedom should be there. So we shouldn't have to rely on these short-term signings. So that should negate some of that impact in terms of, I don't know, the issues that we've had, the consequential issues that we've had from these players who just come in for a short-term period and don't really add anything, and apart from being a block. And now we've seen with players like Menu and Gore, who came on yesterday, and Garnacho getting his run in the side, that those opportunities should go to the players, the younger players who are there at the squad. If they're not good enough, like Fernandes, bring him back off loan. If he's not good enough, he's not good enough, and moving him on in the summer. But we're much better now, giving those chances, even if it means changing the system about, because good grief, Ed, how much we've talked about Ten Hag not changing systems in the last 3 or 4 weeks, that we'd like to see him try something different. If it means, because we don't have a striker, try a strikerless system, then do it. City won a title without playing a striker. I'm not saying that we could do that, but we might be able to operate a system that looks like it can operate rather than square pegs in round holes. And I think that's what I want to see from us moving in that next 3-4 months, is Ten Hag with a little bit more conviction, with the safety of, all right, it doesn't even matter for me. Doesn't matter if we qualify for the Champions League, as long as everything else is moving in the right direction in terms of the performances are there, the team looks like a team. They don't look like the crowd's going to get on the back every 2 seconds, because it doesn't look like they're putting in the effort. I think we can see that they are putting in the effort. Let's not castigate them if they're not good enough. Let's give them enough time to find new places to play. We know that relationship's breaking down with some of the players, but let's just wish them well. Let's not get too frustrated about that. And let's hope that in this period of time that Ten Hag, most importantly of all, navigates this with knowing that he knows and he sees the same things that we know and we see. If he can see that over, and we don't know better than the manager. We don't know that, but you know what I'm talking about when I say that we're seeing, we're knowing and seeing the same kind of things. And as long as he's doing that, then we can forgive tactical mistakes. We can forgive errors in new systems, as long as we're trying things that we haven't seen before and they make sense to why he's tried to do it. And if we see that,
Okay.
I think that's the biggest thing that I want to see from Ten Hag this year. Like a proper conviction of like, this is what it means to play for this football club anymore. And the kind of the sideline players that we've seen too much of that aren't going to be here for a long term. And they haven't really added anything over this last 18 months, that it's time to move forward. And that is the direction that we seem to be moving in. So as long as that, as long as the on-pitch direction mirrors that, then I'll be happy.
Okay. That's a good resolution. I mean, off the pitch is it's related, isn't it? We're going to get a new sporting director. It might not happen straight away. And some kind of new infrastructure around like sporting decisions at the club. I don't know whether that'll be in time to do stuff in the January transfer window, although it's kind of interesting in the filings we talked about yesterday that Ineos have to be consulted about anything that happens before the close of this deal. That is, before the Premier League approves it, which says to me there are plans in place. Why have that clause otherwise, right? So there are plans in place. We're going to get this new structure, and like the shortest term thing is to get rid of some of the players that aren't relevant to the squad, like free up some, even if it's like marginal, free up some cash. And I think that may be what we're looking at in January. Obviously, Van der Beek is already going. It'll be confirmed on the 1st of January, but he's going to Eintracht Frankfurt.
Oh, yeah. So.
Is it Eintracht Frankfurt? I'm forgetting now. Yeah. I think it is. Yeah. Good luck to him. Maybe they'll find a club for Anthony Martial. They probably should. He's adding no value, even though we've got no strikers. And so I'd like to see that. I'm looking forward to seeing what this new sporting structure is. It will look like every other elite club. Now, how we execute, that's a big question still. It can't be worse. It literally cannot be worse than United have done in the past. So I think that's the other resolution. Just behave like a competent club off the pitch. And we'll be in a much better position. I agree with your first one on like Ten Hag's approach. He's got till the end of the season. I think the thing that frustrated me with Scott McTominay, and I'm sorry to keep bringing him up, but it's kind of emblematic. It's not beating down on him, you know. He's got perfectly sound position, like, you know, he is what he is, right? But it was kind of emblematic on Ten Hag giving up on what he thought he should do as the manager. And it was funny that he would compromise on that in like the most crucial part of the pitch, but not in other parts of the pitch. It was really odd. And I think it's contributed. It's like, you're allowed to make errors as a coach. Like, yeah, all the time. Fergie didn't make many, but he did make some. Yeah. And through a really tough period with all these injuries, which may or may not have been contributed to by the training system. Who knows? There's some people who have said that it is. Through all these injuries, I think it was a big test, and we failed a lot. 13 defeats before Christmas, first half of the season. That's a hell of a lot. And I'm saying he'll get to the end of the season. If we get to the end of the season with 25 defeats in all competitions, he won't be here for a third season. I can pretty much guarantee that. That's just normal in football. That's not even me saying that should be the case. It's just normal. And so, yeah, I just want to see consistency from him and his approach. I want him to show he believes in what he's trying to achieve as a North Star. He doesn't have to be Mourinho and super pragmatic. I want to see the balance in terms of like both the system and playing informed players. And yes, I like you, and probably 90% of supporters, I'd much rather he played a young player who it means the world to play. I mean, look at Kobe Manu when he came off yesterday, giving it to the crowd, or Rasmus when he scored.
Yeah.
Or even Hannibal, who came on and he didn't actually kick people all the time. And he played some, quite mature, played it into the corners. I was like, wow, you've been on the pitch for 3 minutes and you haven't got a booking, or tried to kneecap someone. I'd much rather we play those players. Dan Gore, don't know if he'll make it or not, than playing players, like you said, who failed again and again and again. So, yeah. I think there's a template there for Ten Hag to follow. I think off the pitch, he's going to be in a much, the club will be in a much stronger position. Ten Hag, well, we'll see. He probably has like 5 months to prove that he's the right man for the job. And he's probably got a zero bank of credit with the new partial owners, as it should be. He's got to prove himself again and again. All right. You got any personal New Year's resolutions?
Yeah, I think so. Last year I was doing quite well in terms of like a good sort of healthy regimen. You know, I was going to the gym and everything like that. And then I snapped my Achilles in March. It's taken a long time to get back. Like, I kept having setbacks with it, so I couldn't do a lot of exercise on it. So all of my good sort of fitness elements of my getting healthier and everything like that, they went out the window. However, norovirus, which floored me, I lost 1 kilogram from that. So that's really put a spring in my step because I can start
Head start in the January diet,
I don't recommend it. I really don't recommend doing it the way that I've done it, but but I can move around a lot more freely on my Achilles now. I can exercise on it. So
okay.
It is the traditional thing for the early 40s. Not quite middle age, but approaching that 60 barrier, which is now the new middle age.
Yeah, we're moving it out. Yeah,
we definitely. Oh yeah, when you said 50, I thought I'm a bit too close to that, so we'll move it to 60 for middle age. And
fair enough.
For those,
you planning on living to 120? Are you, or like you said, is that the middle age?
As long as
your lifespan.
Well, it's going to take that long for my books to sell, Ed. So I've got to.
Oh, that's true.
I've got to stick around to see.
You got a warehouse full of them, have you?
Yeah, exactly. That's it. If I'm just going to stick around long enough to clear the inventory, and then once I've done that,
I'm looking forward to your 2024 release of the Anthony Martial biography. Are you slated to do that? No.
No, is that coming out? I'm asking you seriously. I know you're talking about me doing it in jest. I don't know if the book itself is coming out. No, that's
it'd have a lot of blank pages in it, wouldn't it? Yeah. No, I'm saying that in jest. Snapping your Achilles. That's as we know with Neil Webb when he did his. You sometimes never come back to full speed, do you? So that's not good.
Well, I definitely retired after it, I can tell you that. Retired from football playing, not writing. I will be writing books, just not specifically about Anthony Martial. He will feature, I guess, at some point in the future. But all
right. Well, good luck with that. Yeah, I will do the same. Like being healthy. I'm going to stuff myself full of Manchester United chicken. And salmonella will like speed things along. Grim. Yeah, particularly grim. Very, very bad. Yeah, that's another resolution. Sort the fucking catering out. What are you doing? Jesus Christ, guys. Yes, I will be healthy as well, and I will. I'm looking forward to 24 with some optimism. We'll see whether that's true or not. And we'll continue recording these podcasts. So, I think anyway.
Oh, yeah, my resolution is to come on after more wins. So
yeah, good. Yeah, do that. Yeah. I now, now that you've tied the success of Manchester United to your appearances on this podcast, we know that it's entirely your fault or not. So, very good. Thank you, everyone. It's a long pod, but. Happy New Year, and we'll catch you some point after the Forest game.